Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Kyle McDowell. Kyle is a former successful Fortune 10 executive where he led tens of thousands of employees over several decades at some of America's biggest firms. Through it all, he became caught up in his own race to the next promotion, bonus, and expansion of responsibility and control. Along the way, Kyle noticed the workforce is overwhelmed, employees feel unappreciated and apathetic, while firms struggle to attract and retain talent, and leaders follow management principles from decades past. Something had to change. Kyle stepped out of his corporate role and left his title, salary, and benefits on a mission to rid corporate America of its toxic approach. Now, as a coach, speaker, and best-selling author, Kyle helps leaders become the leader they never had and teams reach their highest potential by helping them focus on a mindset that prioritizes we over I, you, or me to overcome deep-rooted dysfunction and create a culture of excellence. I'm excited to have Kyle on the show today to share how he leverages the 10 W's to unite and align teams toward a shared vision to deliver excellence. And with that, Kyle McDowell, welcome to the show.
Wow, Eric, what an intro, man. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to be here, man. I just got to know a little bit about you here recently, and we were able to get this set up pretty quickly, which is fantastic.
Very
And
cool.
had some common things or some things in common before hitting record. And I know it's gonna be a great discussion, man. So I'm really appreciative of you being here, brother. And appreciate you taking time with us.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's mine. Thank you again.
Absolutely. So let's talk about childhood and growing up, man. Where'd you grow up? What was your family life like? What'd you do? Were you a sporty kid, arty kid? What was it?
Yeah, man, I grew up middle class at best in an area really proud of its humble beginnings. So I'm from it's called the strawberry capital of the world is our claim to fame. Plant City, Florida. Really, really rural. As a matter of fact, across the street from my childhood home is 40 acres of cows. Behind us was a wooded area.
Nice.
But with that upbringing, I was incredibly fortunate because I had two parents that were both really hard workers, both 100% commission driven salaries. They're both in sales.
Hmm.
My mother started her career as a secretary, word rarely even used in these days, but that's the title she had, and she worked her way up to leading, I think, several hundred employees before she passed. She died of cancer about 12, 13 years ago
Oh
now.
man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, thank you for that, man. And candidly, part of that experience from the moment she became ill to her last days was absolutely pivotal in my transformation, both as a human, but ironically as a member of corporate America as well. So I grew up in these really, really humble surrounds with sports probably as the main focus of my kind of being the first, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So I always excelled at sports, played football and basketball, which I
Your
think
teams,
looking
man.
back was probably instrumental in me taking a liking to leadership.
Mm.
How to get people motivated, inspire others, especially when they don't necessarily feel like doing things. So I think there's a theme of kind of leadership from my beginnings that has been with me since as long as I can recall. So that was me in a nutshell. Coming up, had a sister or have a sister that is still local to the area. Both of my parents have passed, and I've spent the last 30 years in corporate America, really just trying to find my place, find my way through that labyrinth, and
Mm. It is
um,
that.
get, lots of twists and turns, right, brother? But that's what brings me here to chat with you today. So I'm grateful for every one of them.
Right on. I love the sports piece. I was a sporty kid as well, played a lot of sports growing up, and you learn a lot of lessons. I think any performance type role that we have, so I think kids that are in band and things where there's a
Yep.
performance component, or arty kids, I think also performance, but sports especially, I think, or at least from my perspective, having done that, it puts you in that mindset of preparing for things, having to do hard work to get ready for an event,
Right on.
having to think about a team, listen to a leader, a coach, follow direction from, hearing what that leader's got to say. I think it's a great mechanism, just a great tool to teach. Um, for kids and adults certainly. But I think sports is a big deal. I know having hired people, I always liked hiring athletes, especially, if someone had really excelled in their athletics and gone to college, maybe played some athletics in college and things. It's like, man, this person knows how to set goals. They know how to do hard things, do things that make them uncomfortable. All those traits, I think, come out of
Really
sports
important.
or can.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when
Really
it's done
important
right,
stuff.
for
Yep.
sure. Who were your
Yep.
teams? I'm curious. Growing up, who'd you follow?
Well, I've got a picture from a Christmas many, many years ago. I was probably 5, where I'm running around in a Tampa Bay Buccaneers jacket and a Buccaneers bicycle. So I grew up a Bucks fan. My undergrad, I
Right.
went to University of South Florida here in Tampa.
Okay.
So go Bulls, I'm a fan there. And then I've managed to keep up with Northwestern. I went to business school at Northwestern, and so I like to track. Those are kind of the main 3 teams that I'm loyal to more
Man,
than
so you
ever.
left Florida for a minute to go to some colder climate.
Yeah, yeah, sure
Ooh.
did. And that's yeah, you and I were chatting about this before we kicked off, and that was just a good and long enough experience to tell me that I'm a Florida boy and I need to
Yeah.
stay in Florida.
That is rough up there, man. Chicago in the winter that's like
Brutal.
next world. Yeah, that'll get your
Yeah.
attention. Having traveled a bit in business, I can remember, and as a kid, I grew up in Buffalo, New York. So I grew up in
Ooh.
Buffalo, cold, right? But moved to Texas as a 12-year-old and have never looked back. So certainly have Southern, what I would feel is like a Southern blood now. And I've been to Chicago, mostly not in the depths of winter, but a few trips in the dead of winter on business. I remember one time going up there, kind of like with this mindset of, okay, it's going to be cold, but in Texas, when it's cold, you can get by with a light
Yeah.
jacket, moving quickly between buildings. And I remember
Yeah.
I took the train from the airport because it was going to be quicker. It was rush hour. Took the train, no big deal. And I'm looking, get off the train. I'm going to have to walk like 3 blocks to my building. I thought this won't be bad. And I got off and I went 1 block the wrong direction. So now I have got to make that block up. So there's 2 and then 3. So it's going to be about a 5 block walk.
Yeah.
And I was in a panic because I thought my ears were going to literally break and
Yeah.
fall off of my head. I
Yeah.
did not have a
Yeah.
hat
Hmm.
and snot was running out of my nose so badly. I was in a panic. I'm like, I had to step inside of a bar or restaurant. And this lady, this poor gal at the hostess counter looked at me like I had been shot or something. She looked like, oh my gosh, this guy's in trouble. She immediately handed a box of Kleenex out. And I was just trying to gather myself. I'm thinking, I may not be able to make it to my building. This is insanely cold. It was
Yeah.
next level cold. So yeah,
Man,
doing 2 years, 3 years of their grad school, I can't imagine.
well, what's ironic is the story you just tell. I had the exact same experience in downtown Minneapolis.
Oh yeah.
A group of us were in town for business and left our hotel thinking we had a 3 or 4 block walk. One of the fellas in our group, the liquid in his eyes started to freeze. Also another Floridian. We're just not built for that,
No, no,
man.
no. Yeah.
You're a creature of from where you come, and that's for us. Our blood is very different than
Yes.
Minnesotan blood, and I
Yes.
had the unfortunate experience, with all respect to all Minnesotans, I had the unfortunate experience of spending in January, an entire month in Minnesota, and I I can't get warm. I
Yeah.
physically can't get warm. I get in a hot tub, it doesn't work. I go inside the
Yeah.
house, wrap myself up, turn the heater up. It just takes a long time if you've kind of been raised in a more warmer climate. So
Yes.
I recognize the bit of panic you might have gone through because we had that ourselves in our own little. We went the wrong way for a
Yeah.
block or two, and ended
Yeah.
up having to go 6 or 7 blocks. And one of my guys was like really struggling. We were worried about John for a minute,
We might lose a man, right? Maybe a
right?
man down. Yeah, for
Yep,
sure.
yep,
Well, I'm thrilled to hear you say the Bucks because as a Bills fan, lifelong Bills fan, the
mm,
Dolphins and the Bills just don't mix. I was really hoping we weren't going to go there, but man, I love the Bucks. Bucks are cool, right? And you had some
yeah.
devastatingly bad teams in the day, and then went on to win a Super Bowl, right? Had a
Man, growing up, I still have those images of fans in what was called the Big Sombrero. So Tampa Stadium was called the Big Sombrero because it was really a flat,
yeah,
kind of sweeping architecture, that fans would wear the paper bags, and it
yes,
would say Tampa Bay Yucks on it because there wasn't a lot of pride in being a Buccaneer fan back in those days. But it's kind of, as I say that out loud, though, it reminds me that it's really no different than so many other aspects of our life. Like we were terrible for so many years,
mm,
which made that Super Bowl run with which began with Tony Dungy and then
yep,
transitioned to John Gruden. It made it so much sweeter because we had tasted the lowest of the lows for so
yes,
long. So when we finally made it to a point where we were kind of a force to be reckoned with, had a fantastic defense, um, that was such a really cool experience to grow up with, as a Buck fan, to have terrible season after terrible season, be very hopeful for every season, even though reality would set in a few weeks into the season.
For sure.
But that made that Super Bowl so much more. And now we're talking the Bucks' first Super Bowl, right? And then we had
Yeah,
obviously had
Brady
Tom
Super
Brady
Bowl.
join us a few years ago, which was
Yeah,
a really cool experience. I was fortunate enough to actually go to that Super Bowl,
right on.
which is a beautiful moment for Tampa. The first time an NFL team has ever played in its home stadium for a Super Bowl.
Right.
So,
Amazing.
right, really cool story. And his first year with us. So it was, yeah, we've had some good runs off and on over the years. But one of my favorite football teams to watch nowadays is your Buffalo Bills.
Right on.
Josh Allen, to me, this guy is reinventing the position. He's so athletic. He's so big and strong. He's so accurate. He's got a cannon for an arm, and he is one hell of a leader. Of all the teams other than the Bucks that I look to watch, I think Detroit's probably up there as well. I love watching Josh Allen and the Bills.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree. He's like a kid out there in terms of he just plays with abandon, plays with fun,
Yeah,
seems to love what he's doing,
yeah,
seems to be
man.
very loose, and he is a great leader. If you listen to him, even like I remember in the one we've had so many devastating losses at the hands of the Chiefs, but the one where Mahomes came back with like 17 seconds and scored a touchdown to win the game with it was ridiculous, right? He came
One of
up,
the greatest games ever. It's
yeah,
probably 3 years ago, maybe.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he had a press conference, certainly had the post game press conference, but then he did one basically the wrap up of the year because the year now is over at the one of the training facilities at the stadium. Just him, card table or whatever little folding table
Wow.
deal. Him sitting there in sweats, and these reporters just hitting him with questions, and he wasn't hiding from it, and it was devastating. You could see he was just crushed,
Yeah,
and yet he
wearing it.
came into the fire and sat there and took all the questions, sat there for an hour taking questions, and he just never put a foot out of bounds. He just never.
Yeah.
He just, he was like, "Hey, it hurts. Yeah, I feel terrible. We're excited for next." And the things he said, he's so good for the city. I think the city's proud of him. He seems to really love being there, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's really cool. It's a cool story to watch unfold. I'm so hopeful the Bills will get their taste like the Bucks did and get that victory after so many
And it
seasons.
could happen. It could happen this year, picking up Amari Cooper, and they've made some other moves into the season. They look really good. And you bring up the Dolphins, obviously, we're not on a NFL or football podcast, but it was just yesterday.
Yep.
By the time this airs, obviously, it might be a little bit different, but they're looking very, very strong. And I think have an opportunity to go deep in the playoffs, if not all the way.
Yep. Yeah, they are. I thought that game yesterday. I thought the Bills definitely were going to lose it. It just felt like a game they were going to lose, but they managed to find a way. And it's
That's
interesting
right.
because I grew up as a kid watching the Bills get destroyed by the Dolphins year after year after year. I think they lost 20 in a row, so 10
Oh,
years in a
wow.
row to the Dolphins, and it just seemed like we could never win. And now I saw a stat yesterday which I didn't know, but I think Buffalo's won maybe 12 out of 14, something like that in the last string, including playoffs. So, and it feels similar where games we should lose, like in that childhood run of the Dolphins beating the Bills, there were games Buffalo should have won but lost at the end. And I think now that's kind of going on in reverse. Um,
Yep.
the Dolphins were very impressive yesterday. I didn't think that game. I thought the Bills would win, and then as the game was playing out, I thought, oh no, they're going to lose this game because they seem to be able to move at will, and their
Yep.
defense was getting after it. And but it didn't happen. Obviously, that kick was ridiculous at the end. I was shocked when that thing
Right.
lined up and nailed that 61 yarder.
61. Yep. Yep. I
Crazy.
just feel like when you got a guy like Josh Allen, you're never out of it. You just run out of
Mm,
time.
that's right.
I feel like even when he throws picks, he's got a short-term memory. I just love the guy. And I'm not a big, I'm not a Bills fan. I'm not. I just love
Yeah.
watching him play. And I think yesterday was a great example. They should have lost probably. They
Yeah.
they they were they were outperformed
Mm,
most of the game.
yeah.
But it didn't matter. They found a way to put it
On the
put
way.
put the W on the board. So it was a good one to watch.
Agreed. All right, my man. Let's talk a bit about. So your parents were setting this example. They're in sales, commission only. So you got to work hard to do that. What? I'm curious what they sold. What was their thing? Do you remember, or was it a
Yeah,
variety?
man. Yeah, absolutely. So my dad was a sales rep for an industrial electrical supply company. So anytime a mall was being built or a big office complex, he was the guy that would go in and bid all the electric work for So just like an electrician would come to the house, or if you're working with an architect to build something, build a home or whatever, he did that, but on the commercial side. My mother, love her story. She was a secretary for a manufactured housing company. So they made mobile homes.
Yeah.
And an opportunity, a territory opened that, frankly, to hear her, the way she explained it, nobody wanted it. It was kind of a dead end location. There wasn't a lot of volume, wasn't a lot of business, and nobody wanted it. They couldn't find anybody external. Nobody internally would raise their hand. So she said, "I'll do it." And it was her first chance to step out of kind of a individual contributor role to start her climb in the corporate world. And you fast forward probably, I don't know, Mom, I don't want to get it wrong, but probably 30 years later, maybe 35 years later, probably 40 years later, she was a regional lead running a factory, a mobile home manufactured housing factory with several hundred employees.
Amazing.
And she's, through both of them, they just kind of taught me the value of hard work. And I knew, like, for example, I was a big Air Jordan fan growing up. I always wanted the latest and newest Air Jordans every time a new shoe would come out.
And I've seen some pictures of you wearing some Jordans recently now. Come
Yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah. I never stopped,
You got a
actually.
few in the closet.
Yeah. Good. All right. Right on. Well, and especially after I left corporate America in 2019, I'm like, I'm done with these uncomfortable leather soled shoes.
Right on.
It's just not, it was the role, that's why it's probably an important topic for your show is, after a while, it just didn't feel authentic wearing the things that really didn't make me happy to wear.
Right on.
So I've reverted back to Jordan world, but that began many, many years ago. So anytime a new shoe would come out, or frankly, anything that I wanted, that had a cost to it. My parents, there wasn't like, okay, Kyle, save up and you can get those Jordans. And it wasn't like, we'll put some money aside for you and you can kind of get those when that money becomes enough to buy the shoes. It was, if you want this, you must work doing that. And in our case, because we had such a big yard out in the middle of the country, it was almost always yard work. If you want to buy this, and these shoes were $100 at the time, maybe you got 3 weeks of Saturday, Sunday, all day yard work.
Yep.
So at a very young age, I started to associate action and effort with reward.
Yep.
And that's something that's really treated me well throughout my entire career, because I know anything worth having, I got to work for it. And that's just not my business life, but that's in all aspects of life, including my relationship with my wife. If I want a great relationship with her, I got to work at it.
Yep.
So that's something that we've my sister and I think we learned that at a very young age.
Right on. Love that. And yeah, so talk about, with that upbringing, where were you planning to go with that? Right. So you're like, you mentioned college, going to South Florida. So you're like, okay, I'm going to go get my degree and then go into corporate America, or what was your plan as a young man growing up?
I was never going to be a corporate guy. Believe it or not, I wanted to do the news. I wanted to be, I'm going to date myself, but I wanted to be the next Dan Rather. I wanted to be an on television news personality. And then I met with someone inside the School of Mass Communications at South Florida who was like, you might want to think about doing sports. You can manage or marry your passion for sports with your desire to be a TV personality. And I thought, wow, that's perfect. So I want to be a sportscaster. Started to set my sights on being the next breakthrough sports center guy. But here's what happened. So I paid my own tuition, paid my way through my undergrad, working at a regional bank in a call center that I applied for the role when I was 17 years old. And I was rolling the dice that if I were to get an offer, the offer would come after my 18th birthday. So I interviewed in June of 1993. My birthday's in July, and I got an offer in August. So I get this job offer, and at this point, I'm making more money than I ever would have imagined. It's a full-time role. I'm a kid who's looking for a job, but I'm surrounded by people that this is their career. Yep. So there was some eye-opening experiences for me there on, like, okay, I used to work at a Foot Locker and now I'm in corporate America. It's obviously a different paradigm, different mindset. I have to behave differently. How I connect with those around me is probably going to be different. So I started this job and it paid my way through college. And when it was time to graduate, I'm like, all right, let me find myself a role at a television station anywhere in the country, don't care where. And I had quite the rude awakening, man. I realized very quickly that I was going to have to take a pretty significant pay cut after graduating. So it's like, All right, you've been in school for 4 years. You've been at this place for 4 years, this bank for 4 years. Do you really want to cut your income in half to go live in a city that you know no one, to do your own camera work, to kind of start from the bottom, which is totally fine. But
Right.
I looked at it a little bit differently. I said, I already had 4 years invested in this corporate thing.
Yep.
I'd already gotten promoted to a leadership role. I was a supervisor of a small group of people. And I thought, do I want to take that pay cut on a dream, or do I want to continue to plot my course in the corporate world? I chose that path. And then 30 years later, I left.
Wow. All right. So you're in a call center environment
Yeah.
and you're selling, is the call centers an outbound like sales, you're selling bank products or things like that?
All inbound,
All
all
inbound.
inbound. So this, dude, this was back in the day when there really weren't IVR systems and there wasn't a lot of online availability. Um, so if you needed to order checks, you had to speak to someone like me. If you just wanted your balance,
Yep.
in most cases, you had to speak with someone like me.
Wow.
So I would help, just kind of had an overdraft fee. Can you help me with that? I need to stop a check. Can you help me with that? So really
Wow.
fundamental, basic banking things was the role.
Do you remember what you enjoyed about the role? Like what?
Wow, what a great question. I think I really I haven't thought about that in a long time. Looking back, what strikes me as something that was memorable, that was more favorable than not, was feeling as if I belonged somewhere.
Mm.
So prior to that, I worked, as I mentioned, I genuinely, I really did. I worked at Foot Locker. I sold sneakers through high school. And this was my first foray into like big boy time, big boy land. And I remember very vividly people treating me very well.
Mm.
There was one of my supervisors in particular. Her name was Carolyn Thronberg. I haven't thought about that name in
Mm.
probably 30 years. She was a very kind soul who seemed to have confidence in me. Another woman named Lori Haynes was really, really impactful in
Mm.
saying, "You got this." So I felt when I first joined, man, I felt incredibly over my head because again, I'm in this training class and there are people around me that they have years on their career, and
Yep.
this is a guy who stumbled into this job, didn't never think I would get it, frankly. So feeling like I was part of a team and that I was in the workforce, it was like my first. And I
Yep.
bet you can remember this. Like
Yep.
most of us, whether exiting high school or college or whatever point we begin our career, whatever that is, we enter that with tons of optimism and eagerness and excitement. We want to do big things, and
Yep.
and it feels like you're at the beginning of something really special. And that's looking back, that's how I felt.
Yeah, I remember my first job out of college was in banking also.
Oh
Went
yeah.
into a training program for commercial lenders, but as a trainee, you were what they call a credit analyst. So you basically analyzed business credit and put together packages of information, and then the lenders would take that and decide, okay, are we going to extend credit or whatever. But the idea was you were getting groomed to understand how to analyze stuff so that you could go be a lender yourself.
I see.
And I remember loving that job. Similarly, where it just felt impressive, it felt cool. I was
Yeah.
around, and one of the things that I was going to ask you about, or I want to ask you about, is it's this idea that for the first time when you leave college, and in your case, you were doing it while you're in college, but you're not just around your own peer group. You're having to figure out how to survive and communicate and thrive and be around people that are 10, 20, 30 years older than you, right? Different generations, different experiences, different levels of expertise, maybe not smarter, but they have far more experience, which gives
No
them
doubt.
far more knowledge.
Yep.
And and then how do you navigate all that? And that's really for me, normally you're growing up, when you're in the fourth grade, you're around fourth graders and you got one teacher, right? And you're fifth and sixth, and
Hmm.
you're always sort of around your peer group until you go off into the working world. And then it's all wide open, right?
Hmm.
And you're
Hmm.
trying to figure out though, I want to compete with someone that may have more experience. And so how am I going to do that? Well, work ethic, I can work really hard,
Yep.
or my intelligence, or I can try to figure things out at a faster level. But I just remember loving going to the bank because this would have been in the late 80s or 90, I guess 90. Um, and so things were different. Right? You had to go to an office. There was no internet.
Oh
There
yeah.
was, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Wore a suit, carried a briefcase, all that.
Yep.
It just
Yep.
felt like
Yep.
grown up time,
Yep.
and then having really smart and conversations with people and trying to understand businesses. I just dug all of that stuff, but it was definitely an eye opener, right? It was like, because it was the first time. I mean, I'd worked in restaurants in college and stuff, so you're around other people,
Sure.
different ages, but for the most part, I looked at it like this is just some place I am at right now. It's not where I'm heading, right? And
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I would love to hear your take on this. So I think looking back, ignorance is certainly bliss. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wasn't nervous around people with more experience than me. I was eager to learn from them. I didn't know that corporate America largely expects you to be something that you're not. And that's by filtering your words and your
Mm,
vocabulary and trying to make you sound smart. And, rather than adding value, I want to make sure people know that I'm here. So my value is implied or inferred. But I didn't have any of those thoughts. It was like, hey man, I'm new to this job. You've been here a little while. How do you process a check hold? Or how do you process,
mm,
what's the fastest number of keystrokes and the fewest number of keystrokes to get from here to there? Like I didn't have I didn't have the baggage that corporate America invariably, at least in my experience, and from those many folks that I've come in contact with, especially after writing my book, that even if indirectly, the big machine, the whole engine, it almost always encourages you to think differently, feel differently, behave differently. But I was immune to all that because I didn't know. The ignorance was
mm.
there. So I was just a guy that was happy to be there, wanted to make friends. And I did feel like it was a launching pad for what would be hopefully a really special career.
Yeah. I remember. So you felt like, did you feel like you had to filter yourself, or that or
I
you
didn't.
didn't?
I didn't. I was just me. I mean, obviously, I felt
Yeah.
younger. I was because I was younger than most. So I was careful not to I didn't want to expose that age gap
Mm,
by any silly conversations or talking about things that were more germane to me than the 40-year-old sitting
right.
across the cubicle from me. So I just didn't know that I needed to put on a front to fit in. I was just me.
Yeah.
Now, and 30 years later, obviously, so much of that is nonsense, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are tons of environments, especially in big firms, where your individuality and your unique characteristics that make you who you are, they're not always encouraged to come out.
Mm,
It is kind of get in line and follow this method of thinking, which is something that I got very comfortable doing over 30 years, but it's also probably the biggest and most visible challenge in front of me today that I try to knock down as many organizations as I can, depending on my relationship and my working capacity for them and with them.
right on. Yeah. Yeah. My recollection was I felt capable, like I had enough intelligence to be able to figure things out and be, analytical and use my brain to help me sort through things. At the same time, there was an intimidation factor of there's no way I could know more than this person who's 40 because they're older. And I was used to looking at, like the older, whether it was a coach or whatever, like just giving, like, I don't know what the right word is, but basically saying, well, if you think that, then we should just go with that because
Yeah.
certainly you must know
You were
more than me.
deferential to
You're
them.
deferential. That's the right word.
Yep.
And what I remember saying it a few different times to a first line manager that I had of like, man, what I think really doesn't matter because you clearly know the right way. And he's like, no, that's not right. Like you got some ideas, share what you think.
Oh, I love it.
Just because I've been here 5 or 8 years longer than you doesn't mean you don't have the right thoughts. So what do you think? And I remember having to get comfortable sharing some ideas with people older than me, and that was hard for me at first.
Yeah, I'm
It was
sure.
hard. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I had that deferential mindset.
I
But
think, by the way, if it's in my business today, I don't see that very often. I
mm,
think that that deference to experience has almost, and I hate to be negative, man, but it does feel as if that deference has been traded for entitlement. And I don't know
mm,
how else to say it. And that
yeah,
there's a some of it's appropriate. There is as a member of the workforce, we are entitled and we are allowed to have our expectations. We are allowed to set the bar for what the organization should do for us as a member of the team. But I do think in a lot of instances that's become really outsized and overshadows the kind of what the way you and I approached it. And that was
mm,
again with the deference to experience and experience.
yeah.
I don't know that that's there
And
the
the
way that it
wisdom
used
that
to
comes
be.
from that, the life lessons that come from that,
Right.
right? Yeah,
right?
and I would agree. And I remember I worked in a very large consulting organization back in the early 2000s, so right around 20 years ago
Okay.
from right now. And I remember it was very much that you had to earn your way to get to a
Yeah.
certain point where things were then allowed, right? So
Yeah.
you weren't given access to C-suite level clients, CFOs and
Hmm.
CEOs as a new person. It just didn't happen, right? You weren't going to
Hmm.
get access to that level until you had maybe been with the firm for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But I remember there was a group like a new hire class that was coming in, and I remember being at a big meeting, and that was a complaint that came up, like I'm not getting enough access to the CFO. And I remember the person at the front of the room was very like didn't want to create a controversy or say that, well, you're not going to get that access. They were being very kind of kind-hearted in how they responded. But there were managers in the room that were like, you don't get access to that person until you've earned it. Like that
Mm.
isn't going to happen. Like forget that. Do your work hard, show that you can earn your way to that point
Yeah.
before we're going to put you in front of someone at that level. Why would you, what do you have to contribute, right? It was that type of
Of
attitude.
course.
And
Right.
and the feedback from the C level at the front of the room was, no, we want to get everybody's point of view. Yes, that's a good idea. We'll think about. And I remember thinking, and that was the first time I really heard and felt that what you're describing, that sense of, no, I need to be in front of someone, for someone right out of college saying, I need to be in front of someone that's 20 years my senior at the highest level of a client organization. I was stunned and said in an open meeting, I was like, man, wow, is that the attitude now that's coming up? Like that, I never would have said that, right?
Same.
And again, right or
Same.
wrong, but it is more of an entitlement mindset. There probably is some good in there somewhere, right? Because
Yep. Yep.
the younger generation, man, they do things that I cannot do, and I fully recognize that. Like technology wise, the way they
Right.
think, the way they process, they're very different. So I think there's some goodness to like let's let them have a seat at that table
Yeah.
with some
Yeah.
guidelines, right? But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. But all right, man. So let's talk about your career as you start to develop, right? So you're making
Yeah.
some money. Obviously, you chose a path that was going to pay you better than you would have if you started over as a new college grad in the TV world. And I get that draw, especially, right? It can be the carrot, especially as an achiever, someone who sets a goal and goes and gets it. That money thing in the corporate land is a big incentive, right? That they'll put out there, especially if you're in any sort of sales or a role where they're measuring your production. It gets hard to maybe turn that off. So talk about as you start to move up the corporate ladder, what that's like for you.
Yeah. So money was probably the, if I had to kind of weight the reasons why I didn't continue that path, money was probably 80% of it. But there was a 20% factor that kind of sealed the deal for me. So I was an intern at a local NBC affiliate in the sports department. And remember, so I grew up in Tampa. I'm at a Tampa television station. So I'm now working with reporters that I have idolized, I have looked up to, and they played a role in my desire to enter this field. And to say they treated me badly would be a gross understatement. I remember being treated really, really badly. So okay. So I'm here. So the internship is free, and I get it. I'm not above that. I'm gonna work my butt off to try to make a name for myself in this television station. So, perhaps if I'm lucky enough when I graduate, they might bring me on as some entry level producer or whatever. But certainly was really prepared to start at the ground floor and work my way up. But the way they treated me caused me to think, is this really the right path for me? And oh, by the way, I'm already making double over here, and people are treating me really well, and I do see opportunities to promote and do different things, and can take on a lot more. So, it was a combination of those two things that said, okay, dude, this is going to be your path. Now, had I did I have any aspirations to grow into the roles and the sphere of influence, and of course the money? And if you would have said, Kyle, you'll be leading tens of thousands of employees at Fortune 10 firms, I would have said, you're nuts. No, 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 not from where I came. No, no, that's not who I'll be. But I'm going to work my butt off, and let's see where the chips fall. And I managed to say yes to a lot. So when I was hired into that call center, anytime there was a pilot that they needed to try something different, or different campaign was launched, they just needed something different. I would always raise my hand. Sign me up. I'm happy to do that. Similar with new positions, as a position would open, I would talk to those that I trusted and said, is this something you feel I can add value to do, in a role that I could actually do other than entry level stuff. And so saying yes to a lot and taking on opportunities that might have been a bit out of my comfort zone started me on a fast path, man. And I remember I kind of grew up in that call center space. And then I started to get phone calls from other startups, other call centers in the Tampa area. It was like, hey, you have experience running a workforce management team. The specific example that probably catapulted a lot of my air quote success in the corporate world was, hey, you've been running a small workforce team. So scheduling, forecasting, that type of stuff, putting schedules together for a call center of a few hundred people. A call center for General Motors opened in Tampa, had about 600 employees. And I learned of this, applied, got that role, and became a director. So I'm like 25 years old now,
Wow.
leading a staff of about, at that time, it was 12 or 14, maybe 10. But I made a commitment and had some really great people around me, including the woman to whom I reported, who really inspired, motivated me that I was going to try to take on more in this organization, in that role. So you fast forward, I was there 6 years, and by the time I left, I was leading the whole site. I had 600 employees. So that was the beginning of kind of I would say, step function increase of scope. From there, I left to go work for a health plan that I had. This is no exaggeration. One day I had a direct report, a team of about 300 people. Overnight, I went from 300 people to about 2,500 people around the globe. It was back when the Part
Oh
D
yeah.
drug benefit went into effect for Medicare Advantage plans. And our growth at that firm was so over the moon that we outsourced up to 2,500 bodies and people the very, very day it went live. So then I got international experience, and I was, gathered experience managing multiple locations, because now not just 250 people or 300 people in Tampa, I've got people around the globe. So, taking on more and more responsibility, learning more there as well. And I started to create this kind of, reputation sounds a little bit arrogant, but in this circle inside of Tampa, inside the call center and service in a space, I started to develop kind of a reputation of a guy that could come in, either take something from dark, like literally a building that hasn't even been opened yet, into a full-fledged operations center, or join a firm that has maybe a bit of dysfunction, or a team that needs to be a little bit better than it's performing, and try to do a turnaround or transformation of that group. Which I never shied away from my desire to transform things. And that ultimately led to a role where I was leading a lot of people inside of one of the world's, well, at least the country's largest health plans. And I led a handful of states' remediation efforts for the Affordable Care Act. So they had state-based marketplaces. Instead of like enrolling Obamacare, states had a choice to launch their own state-based marketplace.
Yep.
And many of them failed miserably. And when they started to fail, they called my company to come in and bring the resources and expertise to try to get these places and these states back on track and get people enrolled in very important healthcare. And I developed some kind of familiarity there, worked shoulder to shoulder and hand in hand with a handful of governments, as well as the governors of those states, which led me to a
Wow.
path where I ultimately started. I ended up running the Affordable Care Act and 1-800 Medicare enrollment centers, 15,000 people, a $7 billion program. So it just continued down this path of, okay, this makes sense. I've had some success here. What's
Man.
another opportunity? Might be slightly bigger, more impact, try to find more fulfillment as well. And then, of course, when I was able to lead those 15,000 people, I started to get phone calls from other similar sized organizations that were looking for help leading their operational functions, and found myself working at a Fortune 5 pharmaceutical firm where I had another 15,000 employees, a $2 billion OpEx. And so I just had this kind of trajectory that seemed to always continue to grow and take me to bigger and more exciting opportunities. Now, I must say, the only thing that was more palpable than like the emotion of leading big teams and the excitement and the ego that comes from that, the only thing bigger than that was the level of apathy that I started to develop, man, which is a real mind twist, because the bigger the responsibility in the environments that I'm actually responsible for helping create, I began to actually loathe. I really hated working in those environments, even though I was the guy that built them, which is really the epiphany that changed my life and compelled me to write the book. And it's what fuels me every single day now. And it's so fortunate to bring me to guys like you to have a similar conversation about
Wow,
that journey.
man. So that there's so much there to dig into. So you're growing. So a couple things. One, you made this switch from banking and then GMAC or you said GM Financial to
GM.
healthcare,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and so now you're in healthcare and you're having if your call center is obviously they're answering calls or they're conveying information, you had to learn a whole new industry, a whole new language,
Oh
whole
yeah.
new everything, right? And that's not simple stuff. That's complex. Reg D, all that you mentioned, that's like
Yeah.
super complicated. And do you remember
Yeah.
that? Like how obviously you know how to run a call center, but you had to learn the whole new industry behind it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I was fortunate though because the change in industry was less important because I had the domain expertise of running the operations of a call center. So
Hmm.
so before I made that move to healthcare, I was running a workforce management group, so staffing and scheduling and for a few hundred people. The need inside of the healthcare company was the same.
Hmm.
So I didn't need the domain expertise of what the folks on the phone were talking about. I
Hmm.
just needed to know how to
How
workforce
to
plan,
operationalize it,
have
work it.
right, just execute, right?
I got
So,
it.
but with that, I was given an opportunity to learn more about that industry. So while I was kind of by all means a rookie in the healthcare space, and kind of a pretty deep knowledge on the call center kind of infrastructure side,
I got it.
that it gained me access to bigger conversations that were more than just workforce and call center related. And that's when I started to really learn the business of healthcare,
Yep.
which part of that led me to learn more about the Part D stuff, the drug stuff, which ultimately led to a bigger opportunity and landed me at the pharmaceutical firm. So I think everything had a role in
Yep.
the following step, if that makes sense.
Yep, yep. So so talk about this apathy piece that you said you start noticing in yourself. Like where do you think that was coming from that you're seeing that you're feeling apathy? Talk
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
experience.
My man, it started to hit me probably right around year 20, 21 maybe. And I just grew tired of all the duplicity. I saw a lot of toxic behavior. Um, I just felt as if the whole engine, the whole machine was not for me. Now, at this point of my life, my work was everything. I associated it was my identity.
Mm.
So much so that you and I were chatting before we started rolling. I live an example. I lived in Tampa, but I worked in Houston. So I flew every single week back and forth for 3 years. But what I didn't mention to you when I was telling you that story is I took that role 1 month after my marriage, my wedding.
Oh,
So here I am, a newlywed who was spending 4 nights a week on the road in an apartment in Houston. So suffice to say that my work played a major role in my divorce.
mm.
Now it was several years later, right? But my health was not what it once was. I started to feel unhealthy. And I think what was most powerful for me was when I started to notice these feelings, I started to wonder, well, everybody must feel this way. Or, why I'm not special. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel more disconnected than ever, especially in environments that I built?
Mm.
And and the real shock for me was when I picked my head up to start asking questions of others, my circle, those that were my colleagues and my confidants, many of them had traveled with me from company to company.
Mm.
I couldn't get good answers because I learned they didn't. I thought they respected me. Turns out they feared me
Mm.
because I was that guy that was raised with, if you want something done, you gotta, that's what corporate America taught me. It's like if you gotta bark, you bark. And if you gotta
Yeah.
slam, bang your fist on the desk to get the point across, is what you do. And I'd done it very, very well with a lot of success.
Mm.
So when I realized that I started to, based on the responses or lack of responses I would get, I started to realize that most of us feel this way. Most of us enter the workforce with so much optimism and passion. We want to make a difference, but the machine sucks that out of us. And now,
Mm.
man, I did this thing. So I gave a talk last week to about 1,000 people at the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, big group, really, really purpose-driven organization that I was fortunate enough to deliver a keynote. And and it hit me with so many passionate people in this room. I want to now use this platform to see if I want to test something. So at the beginning of my speech, unplanned, it just hit me as I stepped up. I asked everyone in the room, raise your hand if when you entered the workforce, you had a fair amount of optimism and energy. You were eager. You wanted to find fulfillment. You wanted to make an impact. You wanted to do big things. Of course, nearly
Yeah.
every person in the room
Yeah.
raised their hand. And I said, now, if over the course of your career, you have felt less connected to those emotions, less connected to those wants and desires, slowly take your hand down. And almost everyone in the room, more than half, I would say, took their hands down. So that was a proof point for me that while a lot of us have this feeling of like, what am I doing? Like my work is my identity is my work. Um, am I going to have and leave the legacy of, of someone that I should be proud of, a leader that I could say I had an impact on those around me. I made this place better off than it was before I got here. And that apathy for me is what set me off on a mission. So I left corporate America in 2017.
Yeah.
I was a lucky guy. I had a little bit of money in the bank, and I knew I wasn't retiring by any means. I just knew that I needed to get away because my health was not good. The divorce was all but final. And I had a real, kind of inner dialogue that's like, if you want to continue this way, the recipe. You can have a lot of success, make a lot of money, and have no legacy to speak of, and really end up hollow after this after this journey. Or you can step away, figure out what it is that you want to do, what motivates you, and how you might be able to be the leader you never had and create an impact and lasting leadership legacy. Two words a lot of people don't say together: leadership and legacy.
Yeah.
Here's your choice. So I stepped away, and I didn't really have a plan, but I was only away for a week or two. I got a phone call asking if I would be open to coming back and working that Affordable Care Act and 1-800 Medicare role I mentioned earlier. And I took that role under the kind of a personal contract I made with myself. Was I was only going to do it if I was given an opportunity to lead differently. I wanted to do something different, try to get a different feeling and a different kind of level of fulfillment than I had tend to be getting the last several or handful of years. And joining that team is where I created these 10 principles that are the foundation of my Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. It is now the principles that guide nearly every action I take every single day. And it reintroduced me with the not only possibility, but probability of creating really strong bonds while delivering excellent results and having an impact on someone other than yourself. And that's where this whole we orientation and we paradigm has come from.
I love that, man. Let's talk about the 10 We's. Can you share a few? Can you share a few of them or share them all? I'm sure you got them all right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And some context for your listeners, man. I need to be really upfront about this. So as I walk through these, I need to be deliberate that what's a principle? The definition of principle, almost verbatim, is our foundation of truth. It's our system of beliefs for a chain of reasoning. It's kind of like why we do what we do and who we are. So I realized this was the night before. So I took the role, and the night before I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of the organization, I was in my hotel room in Lawrence, Kansas. And I knew I needed to speak to this team with a bit of kind of chutzpah. I needed them to know that I was here. But it also occurred to me that if I wanted to be the leader that I always had been, and that's shine the light on me, I'm the smartest guy in the room. I have all the answers. You guys are just along for the ride with me. I knew that recipe. I knew that playbook. But when I learned that the group of leaders, like my direct reports, they all had a combined average tenure of about 12 years. They had forgotten more about their roles than I even knew. Right. I knew I needed them for me to be successful because this was a new domain for me. Well, I knew enough about the Affordable Care Act from the state side. I didn't know enough to run a $7 billion program. I needed their expertise. So that night before, I was tasked with putting together a few slides because I wanted to kind of make my introduction and say, here's who I am and here's what I expect from you and the things you can expect from me. And after about 2 hours of staring at my laptop that evening, I'm left with 10 sentences. And they each began and still do begin with the word we. And they were, at that time, I didn't call them principles, but they were the things, the guideposts, the rules by which we would hold each other accountable. Me to you and you to me. And there's no leadership gap. If I fail to live up to these, you got to call me out for it. Well, The team, I would say 50% of the group was really optimistic and excited. A quarter of the group was, I'm not so sure about this guy. And then there was a group that was just downright, this guy's full of it. He's a
Right.
charlatan. We can't believe this guy. He'll be gone in 6 months. Whatever. Fast forward 7 years later, I left there many, many years ago. The 10 We's are the cultural manifesto for that organization. It's still how they do their performance appraisals. It
Nice.
is kind of who they are. But the 10 We's, as I always tell folks, they're very simple. There's nothing groundbreaking here. There's not anything that you've not heard before. But when we're talking culture and we're talking inside the workplace, simple is not always easy. And that is the case with these principles. It's simple to understand them, and it's simple to say, I subscribe to these, but doing it every day, not only every day, but every interaction of every day is a very different proposition. So I always have to give that. And then the other caveat I'll give before I just jump right into them, and I appreciate you bearing with me,
Yeah.
is as I walk through them, I would ask you and those listening, drop your job hat, drop your corporate America hat, drop whatever it is that you do for a living hat, and listen to these principles in a way and try to position them and find a home for them in your personal life. Not just how you behave at work, but how you behave with those outside of work, your loved ones, your friends, your family, any relationship. And that's where the biggest unintended byproduct, consequence, whatever frame of words is the right approach, I didn't anticipate. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things because I hear from readers now how the principles are helping change how they're raising their children,
Mm.
which is, I have chills just saying that. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to kind of give that context and
No,
background.
I
And, and,
appreciate the
and
context. Yeah, for
of
sure.
course, yeah,
And
I think that matters because what I didn't want to have happen, Eric, I didn't want these principles to be words on a wall. I
mm,
didn't want them to be mission statements that no one can recite, that makes the big wigs feel good. No one's living it. It doesn't compel anybody to behave any differently. To me, I did not want my name associated with that. It had to be authentic and genuine to who I was and what I wanted us to be. So out of the gate, it's very fundamental. It's the most simple of all. It's we number one. It's we do the right thing
yeah,
always. We can argue over what the right thing is. We can disagree what the right thing is. But one thing is unnegotiable, not negotiable, and that is we're never going to cut a corner. If it takes longer, if it costs more, whatever, we're going to do the right thing. I just believe if we're high functioning behind the curtains and our team sees that we're focused on doing the right thing, our clients feel it, and the product or service that we sell can only benefit. And if you're going to be on this team, the number one way to demonstrate you're committed to doing the right thing is to pick up weed number two. And that's we lead by example. Again, not groundbreaking. And the question should not be, am I or should I lead by example? The question should be, I am leading by an example. That's a given. The
yeah,
question should be, am I leading by an example that I'm proud or would be proud to see replicated? If my actions were played out in the company newsletter or blast all over social media, the way I handled that interaction with an employee, how I
mm,
conducted myself in a focus group or a one-on-one meeting, would I be proud? Is this something that I would love to see repeated?
yep,
That's the question to ask. Now, as a member of a high functioning team, if you're committed to doing the right thing and you want to lead by example, well, we got to do what we say we're going to do. And that's we number three. We say what we're going to do, and then we do it. And it's almost a given that when we make a commitment to a customer or a client, we're going to deliver on that. But I've found
mm,
there's a big disconnect inside behind the curtains when I
yep,
make a commitment to another team member, especially as the leader. I mean, it's very easy for me to say, yeah, Eric, I'll look into that training curriculum you're proposing and never get back to you. And because I'm a jerk of a boss, you're not confident enough to say, hey, Kyle, you said you would do this and then hold me accountable for that. But
yeah,
not in the culture of excellence. When we say we're going to do something, we do it. The only exception is we get way in front of that deadline. There's no surprises the day of.
yep,
Um, but if we're going to do that, we got to take action. So we number four is we take action, and I truly believe we're going to take action and make mistakes.
yep,
Making mistakes is okay. I don't judge people by the mistakes that they make. I judge by how idle they are, and if the mistake is made multiple times.
mm,
If they correct the mistake, obviously, and for our teams to take action and be comfortable with the proposition that they might make a mistake, we must have we number five, and that's we own our mistakes. I can tell you a dozen stories since I created this principle of how someone has made a mistake on the team, raised their hand, and been like, dude, I expect some disciplinary action here, maybe even termination. I made a big mistake. But I find when you own it, you're more allowed and given the ability to correct it and create stopgaps and quality procedures to put in place that you don't have that happen again. I think people rally to that. I don't know about you, man, but I don't judge by mistakes. I judge if you repeat it, and I judge if you're able to remedy the mistake, because mistakes will happen.
Right.
If you want that environment to be everywhere and pervasive, where folks are comfortable raising their hand, we have to embrace we number 6, and that's we pick each other up. And there are 2 components that we pick each other up. One is when someone's struggling, someone's got a sick child, or maybe they're going through a divorce, or they've got an aging parent, or maybe they're just not at their best for whatever the reason is. It's on this team, not just the leader to members of the team, but peer to peer, we pick each other up. That's the first component. The second is, I think it's more appropriate for the leader of the group, but just as important, we propel others to new heights. So if there's a member on the team that wants to go do something else, including outside of our team and perhaps outside of our company, if they have eyes on doing something else that will add more value into their lives, and they can add more value into it, take care of their family, find themselves in a place where they have more fulfillment, it's our obligation, not as a corporate citizen, but as a human, to help someone find that next home, whatever that is, even if it means your work product, the team that you lead is perhaps going to be compromised because you've lost that talent.
Yep.
The upside of that, man, when someone realizes you care more about their path and their trajectory and finding their next home and doing what really fills their cup, instead of their cogs in the wheel, and you need them to perform a particular function, they work harder. They work harder because they recognize that you care about them and not just what they can do for you. So we got to pick each other up. This is the point. The last 4 is when we kind of turn the corner away from, this is pretty obvious, easy stuff, to a little bit more difficult. And we number 7 is the beginning of that. And that's we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. Look, man, I'm so grateful when my Uber driver puts gas in my car before he or she comes to pick me up, but I didn't pay for that. The real world pays for results, right? We pay to get from point A to point B. And especially in big organizations, there's this participation trophy mindset that's like, hey, man, I was busy all day. I had 13 meetings, or I was double and even triple booked throughout the day. It doesn't impress me. If you can't draw a straight line from your activities to the outcomes that you've been assigned, whether that's on your performance appraisal or whatever you and your leader have agreed to, the things that the expectations for you in this role, if your activity doesn't contribute to those outcomes, they should be scrutinized. Why are we doing this? If there's no value add for anyone, the employee doesn't benefit, our clients don't benefit, and doesn't help me deliver on my objectives, why am I doing it? But that's precisely what a lot of organizations do. Meeting cadence is probably the biggest culprit for this. We have meeting after meeting, and then let's have a meeting to talk about the meeting. And then we'll have a meeting to pre-plan for the meeting. And then we'll forget something in that first meeting, have to schedule a follow-up meeting. It's pervasive, man. It's toxic inside of most organizations. So
and
I want us to be focused on
you'll find people, or I've found people in corporate America that they live in that environment. They love it. They thrive in it, because it's like, and you see them, it'd be like a black hole. Like, man, if my thing that I'm trying to move through to an end state has to go through that person, it's going to go into the black hole. It's going to disappear, because they love and they thrive on, I'm just really here not to do anything risky. I'm just going to move the paper from the left side of the desk to the right, back to the left. We'll think about it. Oh, we need to reassess, and things just come to a screeching stop. And it's like, that person has made a home. They've got this little empire, this little domain, and no one knows what to do with them. And they are the ultimate work derailer, right? You see those people they thrive in that. It's like they get in there and they just start this whole little ecosystem of their own,
Beautifully said. Beautifully. And the crime of that whole scenario, what happens is people stop raising their hand with innovative ideas. Why do I want to run uphill with a parachute on in the sand to do something that I know is the right thing for our employees or for our customers? Why do I want to fight this bureaucracy? I don't. So, okay, sir, yes, sir. I'll keep my head down. I'll do as you say. And I think that is the soul-sucking existence so many of us end up living every single day. Eric, did you know that? I'm sure you actually did know this. We spend 100,000 hours of our lifetime on average working. The only thing you will do more than work in your entire existence on this planet is sleep.
Yep.
So if we're going to spend so much time at this thing called work, we need to get the most out of it. Not what can get the most out of us. That's important, though. what can we get the most out of as well? Because it needs to be a mutually beneficial relationship. So now, the when we recognize this activity and outcome challenge, that's when we number 8 becomes really important. And it's my favorite of all the principles. Admittedly, it is the toughest for many to get behind and grasp because it's contrary to the way that so many of us were brought up in this corporate life. And that's we challenge each other diplomatically. Historically, in most organizations, challenges come from on high. They go down to the masses. Occasionally, you'll get a challenge from one boss to the next boss. But very rarely is it authentic and genuine where a boss or a leader says, hey, man, if you're on this team, the similar scenario that you mentioned earlier, which warmed my heart, early days at the bank. No. If you see something, say something, challenge us. There's got to be another path. I don't have all the right answers. Now, with this principle, it's important to remember the diplomatically part, but probably more important than that is the one rule that comes with this principle. All challenges must be grounded in either data or experience. They can't just be your opinion. They can't be, I don't like this path. Well, that's not helpful.
Right.
If you have data or experience that says the path that we're on is the wrong one, even if anecdotal data, but you have something other than just, I don't like this.
Yep.
I think we're all obliged to listen. We need to understand from where that position is coming, the repercussions of us continuing down this path, and the benefits of us just press and pause to say, wait a second, this challenge needs to be heard. And the beautiful part about this one, man, and I've seen it more times than I can tell you, is when you have a team of people that are subscribed to these principles, they're on the bus, everyone understands that we're going to be our best and do our best to follow these principles every single day, every interaction. When there are hard times, when the waters get choppy, you can hear it. People lean into these words. It's like, hey, Eric, man, listen, we challenge each other, right? And from that moment forward, data or experience is coming. It's an opportunity for us to be better. We're on a continuous improvement journey. And I'm not going to come and sit down with you and say, your results are down. Why? I'm going to say, we challenge each other, right, man?
Yep.
And you say, okay. And then we pick each other up starts to happen. I noticed this. Maybe there's something, is there anything you want to share with me? Like what's happening behind the scenes? I just need you to know I'm here for you, but I also need you to step up. The team needs you to step up. And here's why. And here's what's happening because of your lack of contribution. But we can't have we number 8 without we number 9, and that's we embrace challenge. I want our teams to be galvanized. When the big boss comes in and sets a new target for us, we may not like it. We're not going to push back. We're going to say, sir, yes, sir, ma'am, yes, ma'am, because we're going to be galvanized by these challenges. Now we'll appropriately communicate risks and,
right.
When there are objectives that just seem, way too lofty. But let's say it's an external risk. It's an external challenge, like a competitive threat. Maybe we're dealing with, I don't know, a pandemic, whatever the thing is, whatever that challenge is. And you said this at the top of our conversation, getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, identifying a challenge for what it is. That's a growth opportunity. I want my teams to understand this is called work. It's not called fun, and part of work and part of life and overcoming and achieving things, almost anything worth having, is the result of overcoming one or more challenges. They're not handed to you, or else it's not worth having. I want our teams to be galvanized. And then lastly I was purposeful to leave this one as the last principle, because if it were any earlier, I feel like it might be a recipe for disappointment. We number 10 is we obsess over details. In almost every aspect of business, what separates the good from the great and the great from truly special is the details, man. I look at a company like Apple and the level of effort and engineering they put into just the packaging, right? The sexy stickers, how well the box fits on one another. It's the whole unboxing video thing never even existed until Apple got really, really invested into their packaging, because Steve Jobs wanted that to communicate a thing of beauty. The product inside must be truly magical if the opening of the package is this cool.
Yes.
So I feel like, for us to be focused on by the way, I can juxtapose that experience with Apple with like an IKEA instruction manual.
Oh man.
Right. Or
Half the time the packaging feels like it's trying to kill me. That
right. So it's a very different
going to stab me.
Right. And I didn't even have to elaborate. You know exactly what I was talking about when I said that. Obsessing over those details, especially when it has an impact on the experience of those you lead and those you serve, your customer, there's no downside. Now, every situation scenario is scenario driven. Only you can decide how far to obsess about these details, how deep to take it. But generally the rule of thumb for me is if it's behind the curtains and I'm sending an email to a member of the team, or it's a conversation that's not in front of a client or for a client, I can be a little less kind of kind of diligent in making sure my capitalization's right, my punctuation's good, my grammar's where it needs to be, the quality of the product is good. But if it's going to go outside these four walls and anyone else is going to see it, we're going to obsess over it. That's just who we are. And
Yep.
so those are the 10 W's, and they're the principles that have changed my life, man. They've changed who I am as a leader, who I am as a person outside of work. And it's the foundation for my book. That's kind of the purpose of what I do now.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Just hearing those, to me, I was thinking of the sports analogies we were making, or the sports conversation we had early in the call. Those Super Bowl winning teams, I would say that you could, and I know you've coached and worked with some professional sports organizations and individuals in college. Those are the things that are hallmarks of great sports teams as well, championship winning teams, right? I mean, would you say that have you seen that as well?
100%. And my favorite example is, again, we challenge each other. So an NFL team, for example, has a 53-man roster. The math alone will tell you one head coach is not going to be enough to get the most out of those 53 men. Likewise, everyone on the team is paid to do their job. Tom Brady, he's probably the easiest example, and we talked about him a bit ago, is if he ends up on his rear end more often than not, he's getting sacked like crazy. This is back when he played, obviously. If he's getting sacked over and over again, shouldn't he be able or allowed or empowered to call out members of the team, because they're not doing their job? It is their job to protect him. They're not going to be perfect at it,
Right.
but if it happens over and over and over again, we gotta investigate what's happening. And I think it's totally appropriate for one member of the team to challenge another. I think the sports examples provide the best. They really highlight what a principle-driven leader can and should do, and the outcomes that come with leading with principles.
Yes. And also, if you think about a sports team like an NFL team, 53-man roster, what I think it's easy to forget is it's not just one blob of 53 guys. You've got defensive guys, you've got offensive guys, you've got special teams guys, you've got specialists, you've got guys that only play in certain down and distance. You've got certainly the stars that everyone knows their names,
Mm-hmm.
but all those guys have to play together. They have to know their role. They have to be inspired around each other. And if at any point the team develops an attitude of, well, we lost because the defense sucked, or we lost because the
Mm.
quarterback threw an
Mm.
interception, or the kicker missed a kick, then the team will eat itself. It goes back to that whole idea of we challenge each other, but we pick each other up. And I think you see the great teams recognizing, and we're not gonna lay waste to each other in the media and point fingers when we lose
Yeah.
as to what you did wrong and why we didn't win because this guy again failed. What did we do that put that guy in a position to fail, right?
Mm.
We all have to own our stuff. We all have to perform. At the same time, is there something that the greater organization did or didn't do that set that guy up to fail? Did he feel like there was no one behind him, so he had to play hurt, which made him miss the block
Mm.
that caused the sack? Did he not have confidence in that second level guy? Or maybe his ego was too large that he wouldn't allow himself to sit because he didn't want to give
Mm.
up his position to the number two guy, thinking he may never get his seat back, and which caused the sack, which caused the loss. It's all got it. It all rolls into a
It's
very
all
similar,
connected, right? It's
connected.
all connected. Well, and that's what I found. And as a leader inside the corporate world is so. I'll be very specific. So in one of my roles, I had 6 or 7 direct reports. This was later on in my career, and 3 or 4 of those functional areas. So it's a VP for each functional area, and 3 or 4 of those VPs were leading really high functioning organizations. Uh, Fantastic performance. 1 or 2 were average, and then 1 or 2 were underperforming. They just simply weren't performing. But to talk to each one of those leaders, you would not walk away thinking we as a team are not succeeding. And that is the case, by the way. When we have 6 or 7 people and only 3 or 4 of them are really killing it, the others have an opportunity to be better. The team is not winning.
Mm,
So your special teams offense defense example is absolutely perfect. Just because you can have an offense that is the shining star of the league in every category imaginable, but if their defense is terrible and they're giving up more points, that team is not winning. That offense might set a whole bunch of records, but as a team, they're not going to win. So what I experienced was, okay, yeah, you're crushing it. Your team is crushing it. All the results are where we need to be, but I needed to sow the connection between their victories and their peers' lack of them.
Mm.
So they needed to see how they must work with one another to help one another because of all the common experiences they've had, all the unique experiences they've had. The strength of them together is much more influential than any one of them just trying to bang their own drum for their own team. So creating that connection is so important. But sports really highlights it. And I love your offense, defense, special team scenario because it's so true.
Yeah. How do you, man, from my own perspectives and my own experiences in corporate America, it's so the me first, the I versus the we is such a prevalent thing that as a we focused person or someone that's like, hey, how do I help? Because I tend to have a mindset of, that's been given to me by my parents and by my faith that says, I want to help others. I want to help lift you up. And yet if you get into an environment where you're in a mindset of like, I just want to take, well, you can drag me to the bottom of the ocean, right? You can,
Yeah.
my giving to your taking can be horrible for me. And so how do you deal with, and corporate America, and I think just the world in general says it's a take place, right? Go get yours, go do what's
Yeah.
best for you.
Yeah.
Everything else be damned. And so how do you deal with that? How do you
Yeah.
begin to instill that culture that can pervade, that is we focused? Can you
Well,
talk
so,
on that?
so I love the question because I do think I'm uniquely qualified to answer it because I've done both. The
Yeah.
first 20-ish years of my career, I was that guy. It was all about me. And if you were going to stand in the way of me being me and becoming the bigger and more powerful and influential me, then you'd have to deal with me.
Right.
Um, the transition away from that to a much stronger we orientation and paradigm was a leap of faith
Mm.
because I knew I knew I could take this new role, never create the 10 we's, probably have a fair amount of success, but also be left with tons of apathy and disconnected feelings and no real connections, no bonds with those around me. And I was just tired of that. So what I had to do, and I think I would give this advice to any person even in their professional or even their personal lives that is contemplating a different path. And that may involve leaving an organization that you're very comfortable in. You may have to take a step or two backwards to go 3 or 4 steps forward. Is understand and define your own principles. What
Mm.
matters to you? What do you want to be known as? What things are important to you as a leader of people, or as a member of a team? What is important to you? You have expectations. And what I found to be the most important component after establishing those principles and sharing them with others is living them
Mhm.
every single day, every interaction. But more importantly, being open and vulnerable when I failed to do so. I'm not perfect. And there are times, I'm certain there are times that members of my team today, members of teams past, they will say, wait, Kyle's not living that. I hope more often than not over the last handful of years, they've been comfortable to say, dude, you're being a hypocrite
Yeah.
because I got to listen to that. But where it goes wrong is someone saying we're a family or we're a team
Mm.
oriented. We are who we are. Let's lock arms and all that. But the first time the waters get choppy, it's a do as I say, command and control mentality. Trust is lost. There's no fellowship. We don't have a team. We have a
Yep.
bunch of people that work together at that point.
Yep.
It's a long-winded way of saying, Eric, you just absolutely must take your own medicine, take
Yeah.
it publicly, live the principles openly, overtly, conspicuously. I don't know, I know
Yeah.
I still wear a bracelet that has a we principle. Never take it off. I surround myself with it. And I want to surround myself with people who are committed to similar or the exact same principles and are comfortable calling me out when I'm not doing it.
Yep. That's powerful. I love that. Awesome, man. So, talk about what you're doing now. You're taking the principles to organizations around the country, around the world. You got the book. What's happening for you now?
Yeah, man. So the book has been out just over a couple of years now, and I got to be honest. When I decided to write the book, first of all, I didn't tell anybody for a while because I was like, "Who wants to read a book from me?" Imposter syndrome is real.
It is real.
I still struggle, dude.
I
I still
live it.
struggle with it. I told my wife at the
Same.
time, if this book sells 1,000 copies, I'll be over the moon. As of last month, we just eclipsed 16,000 copies.
Nice.
We sell more every single month, but I don't share those numbers out of arrogance. I share them because I am more than ever convinced that we need to transition away from this my and me mentality that social media has told us we must follow transition that to a more we-centric approach. If I were my 20-something-year-old self, or even in my 30s, and I heard me on a podcast talking about the value of we, I'd probably roll my eyes. I'm not naive to that. It's not what's in vogue. It's not where most people would encourage you to go. But I will tell you, the fulfillment that comes from making that transition, the impact you can have, is so profound. I don't care if you're the manager of a barista of a coffee shop, or you're a barista at that coffee shop. You have an ability to impact those around you, and you should take that opportunity to do so. So what I do now is promoting the book. I do a lot of public speaking for both at conferences, but also with teams inside of organizations. But where I have the most fun lately is working with entire leadership teams. So I just left a nonprofit, a really, really purpose-driven group of men and women that acknowledged they had an opportunity to do things a little bit differently, but they couldn't figure out how to make it happen. So we've got a accompanying workbook to my book that either I will go in and facilitate a multi-hour, multi-day session, or one of my trainers will go in and facilitate. And we essentially walk the entire leadership team through the book. We have exercises and sharing things, reflection type exercises as well, to get people more comfortable with this idea of we. And man, it's just beautiful to watch an entire team transform at the same time. So I do a little bit of executive coaching, promoting the book, lots of speaking, and then working with leadership teams of organizations of all size, industries of all makes as well.
That's awesome, man. I love that idea too. And it's not just an idea, it's right, which is we all start with controlling how we behave. So we can all adopt those 10 we's, or a team first or a other first mindset right out of the gate, whether you manage only yourself or you manage anyone.
Right.
And then certainly even if you're not the CEO, even as you start to manage teams, you can instill that in others and it can ripple out. But it starts first with us. We have to own our own behavior. And so owning those principles, and then having a friend, a colleague, whoever, be comfortable enough to call you out. Because like you said, we're all human. We make mistakes. We have sinfulness. We have those things that we fall down and we're like, man, you got me. You're absolutely right. And I appreciate you calling me out and get me back on course. We need that. And so it starts with you. It starts with me, right? It starts with us. It starts with each individual owning their own behavior. And then like you said too, I think if you get to a point where it's like, this is not a fit for me because I understand what my own mission, values, vision, but what drives me. And if it's out of sync, I may have to leave, right? I may, if I just am finding that it's not going to happen, I may have to, if it's out of sync, right? And I struggled with that earlier in my career around, I can't do that because of money, or I've just taken 3 steps forward. Why would I take a step back? And I think it's so important to your long-term happiness and getting rid of that apathy. And just a couple of final thoughts around this whole notion that I can remember just talking about this, just put me back in that place of being so excited coming out of school and can't wait to take off. But feeling others around you like, slow down there, Skippy, like everybody tap the brakes. Like you got a little too much energy, a little too much excitement. You just got to get into the flow of how things go around here. And yeah, there's some of the cadence stuff, but a lot of it is what you're talking about, which is that environment that says a lot of good things don't happen here. You just got to get into the flow, and it just can crush the excitement. You know, what you're describing is how do you push back against that, right? How do you create some excitement?
That's it, my man. That's it. Because you're entitled to that. If you're going to spend 100,000 hours working, and listen, man, I don't want to come across naive. I get it. Most of us don't work because we want to. We have obligations. We'd much rather be somewhere else doing something else. I get it. But if you find yourself in an environment that's not allowing you to contribute the value that you know you're capable of contributing, I think it's worth taking a hard look to say, can I take a step back? In other words, maybe a little less money, maybe even lose a little bit of scope of influence. And if the answer to that question is no, I can't, I have these commitments, I have respect. I get it. I don't want anyone to hear this to think that I'm naive to the real world. I'm not. But I also want that to be balanced with, I have a finite amount of time on this planet. And I owe it to myself, those around me, those that care about me, those that I have a chance to touch and have an impact. I owe it to them to at least consider another way. Is there a better way? It's the question I've asked myself almost daily since 2019 or so. Is there a better way? And usually the answer is yes, but it may be uncomfortable and you have to take a step back and you have to maybe take a little blow to the ego, but it is almost always worth it, because on the other side of that is a place that you may not have even believed was possible. And that's a really fulfilling life.
Love that, man. Great way to conclude. Where do people find you, Kyle? Where do they keep up with you and track your work?
Well, other than this fantastic conversation, I'm on essentially all social media platforms with the same handle. It's at Kyle McDowell Inc. My website, very same. It's kylemcdowellinc.com. And of course, the book is Begin with We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you again publicly for the opportunity to join you today. You do really important work. I have a lot of respect for someone that's done it as many episodes as you have, and to be given the chance to share my message on your platform is really, I take it very seriously, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
I appreciate that, my man. And truly, the honor is mine. I'm humbled always to have guests like yourself on the show. It's just such a great opportunity to meet great people doing great things in the world and impacting people one individual at a time. It's fantastic. So truly humbled and honored to have you here today. Awesome. To our audience, thank you for taking time from your busy day to listen to the show. Always humbled that you do that. If you would write a review, give us a comment, forward the show to a friend, it helps us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.